Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Be a Better You podcast. I am your host, Allison K. Dagney, your subconscious reprogramming expert and survivor of 20 years of emotional and narcissistic abuse. Now, in today's episode, we are breaking apart another sneaky self-blaming thought. Last week, we talked about why you shouldn't have seen the signs, and I really go through in depth why that is. So if you want, you can go back and listen to that one. But this week, we're talking about this belief that I should have known better. And maybe you said this to yourself after looking back at the choices that you made in that relationship. And we're going to talk about why that is unfair and untrue to you. So I thought this about myself too. I should have known better. I thought the one from last week as well, right? I should have seen the signs. Like all these things, we ultimately do this because it gives us a sense of control. Like maybe if I had known better, or maybe if I'd seen the signs or things like that, that I could have changed the outcome, that I could have saved myself all of this pain and heartache. But that's not necessarily true. And this belief that I should have known better, for me, looped over and over and over again. I used to think about it nonstop. I used to replay all of the old conversations. I was writing down things incessantly, memories that I had. I was sharing them with people. I was posting things on social media, and I was like, oh my gosh, I should have known better. I should have known better. So maybe you yourself have done this, or maybe you're doing it now. Survivors really think a lot of the times, like, I've been through this before, I should have recognized it. But knowing in theory isn't actually knowing in reality or like real time, because you're in survival mode most of the time when you're being abused. Your defenses are up, your thinking is clouded, your emotions are high, your body is dysregulated, right? So even though like maybe you've been through it, maybe you understood it, maybe you even knew about it, right? And then you think I should have known better, or I should have recognized it, or that sort of thing, is going to keep rearing its ugly head. But all that belief does is it keeps you anchored in the past. It keeps you stuck where you used to be, not where you are now. And that is not where we want to be. We've got to move forward. We've got to take the trauma and transform it into something new. We have to heal ourselves. We have to heal for ourselves. We have to heal for our families, for our children, for our friends, right? So maybe you knew what abuse looked like in your parents' relationship. Maybe you saw this. Maybe this was something that was very close to home for you. But you got into your own relationship and then it felt totally different because it was all wrapped up in love in the beginning, tied with a pretty little bow, and now looking back, you're like, oh, these were the same patterns in my parents' relationship, or I saw this when my mom got remarried and she experienced the same thing, right? But for you, it feels different because you are in it, right? And you are experiencing it from a totally different angle. Or maybe you had read an article about narcissism or a book about it or watched a video about it and you thought you knew about it, but your partner's charm and charisma really made it unrecognizable to you, to where you just were like, oh, there's no way. Look how wonderful this person is. I've heard of this before. I've had women DM me on Instagram so many times. He was the most amazing man when we were together at the beginning. He was so kind. He took me on trips. He bought me things. He made me feel so special. He put me on a pedestal. And then we got married and boom, something bad happened. Or then we had kids and boom, he totally changed. He wasn't the same person, whatever that might be, right? But that what they were presenting in the beginning you couldn't have seen any of the narcissism. You couldn't have seen any of those things because of the way that they presented it. So it was not recognizable to you. Or maybe you told yourself, I'm never going to let somebody treat me like that again. I'm never going to let somebody disrespect me. I'm never going to let somebody abuse me. But for most people who haven't healed those wounds, you might end up in a new relationship, a second or third or fourth or whatever, because of the emotional wounds that have not been resolved. And those wounds are going to drive you to behave in a certain type of way to get a certain type of feeling. And that's going to always be stronger than logic. That's all the stuff that's happening on a subconscious level beneath the surface. It's driving 95% of the show, right? So some people call this trauma bonding. I don't like that word. I don't use that word. But if you're familiar with it, then you know what I'm talking about here. But you may go back to somebody who treats you badly or repeat those same patterns with someone new because you haven't healed the wounds from the root. Once you heal the wounds from the root, that weed ain't growing back again, okay? And this is how I help people in my one-on-one programs because we dig up those roots. What is it that is continuing to create these behaviors for you? And we rewire them in the process that I use. And I hear it a lot too in my community, Radiate and Rise, my membership community. And it's this guilt that people carry, like, oh, but I knew better and I shouldn't have gone back to him, or I shouldn't have ended up in that new relationship, right? But this is just guilt talking, and guilt is just something that weighs you down. It is not something that actually supports your growth or your healing. It's like carrying a bag of rocks around. If you just put that bag of rocks down, you can get up the hill a lot freaking faster. We already have this mountain to climb. Why are we carrying the guilt with us? Okay, so I want to mention the brain and body connection here. So when you're in a fight, flight, fawn, or freeze state, and some of you may be in this chronically, like all the time, your brain is not operating from a logic place. It's operating from survival. That's its job, okay? The prefrontal cortex, that's that front part of your brain, like right above your eyes, behind your forehead. That is where logic, reasoning, all of that stuff takes place. Well, what else is happening when you are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, especially if you're in it chronically, which many people are after trauma, is that prefrontal cortex takes a back seat because it's not important, okay? And your brain is so complex that it says, we don't need to worry about logic right now. We need to worry about surviving. We need to worry about not getting hurt. We need to worry about running away, protecting ourselves, putting up our defenses, whatever that means, fighting for ourselves, whatever that means, okay? And then the other part of this is that cognitive dissonance where your nervous system is prioritizing keeping the relationship safe. Like, oh, I have this relationship that actually in some ways I feel safe in because it's familiar. You've probably heard me say this before. It's familiar. So it's like, oh, I know this. I've been with this person for so long. I kind of know what to expect. I know how they're going to react. I know how to, what's going to happen if I do this, then they're going to react in a certain way. Like I know what to expect. It's very predictable, which predictability is very safe feeling, right? So your nervous system is going to prioritize that over questioning it because questioning it is going to make you feel unsafe. So cognitive dissonance is when you have two opposing thoughts at the same time, right? Like this relationship is really bad for me, but I feel good in it sometimes and it's safe. So it's like, how do you reconcile that, right? So that's what's happening in your mind. And then let me give you some examples here of like what that would look like. So let's say that you were always raised and you always knew that screaming at someone is not okay. But when the person who was screaming at you told you it was your fault, then your brain chose the explanation that helped you feel in control. So if I just try harder, be better, do more, behave the way they want, this will stop. The screaming will stop, right? So that's kind of how that works. Like, you know it's not okay. This is how that cognitive dissonance kind of comes up. You know it's not okay, but in order to feel safe, you just make this explanation that, like, well, okay, I know it's not okay, but like if I just behave better, then that will stop. If I just do what they want, it will stop. Most often, here's the surprise, it doesn't. It doesn't stop. Okay? And you probably know that. Another one would be like when you're walking on eggshells, you know that's not healthy in a relationship. You know you shouldn't have to walk eggshells in a relationship, but it actually feels safer than addressing it, confronting the person, saying, hey, can we talk about this, right? So you just keep doing it. You know that it's not healthy. So that's the one thought, but then you do it anyway because it feels safe. That's how cognitive dissonance happens inside your brain. So knowing better only exists with the information that you have, and the safety that you have now. So when you said, I should have known better, right? Or like, I'm sitting here saying, well, you couldn't have known better. How could you have known better, right? Knowing better is only happening with information or the safety that you have right now to be able to see it in that moment, because all these other things that are happening inside of you and your nervous system and your brain, your subconscious mind, like it's super, super, super complex. And this is partly why I have that Break Free from Rumination course, the $15 online course that you can take, because I teach you how to stop replaying all the should haves and, all the things that you keep replaying and start living in the present moment, because that's where true healing happens. Not in the past, not in the future, in the present moment. So let's flip this. Instead of, I should have known better, what else is possible? You have to remind yourself that. You have to ask yourself that. You keep replaying this, I should have known better, but is it possible that you shouldn't have known better, that you couldn't have known better, that you couldn't have known what you didn't know then, right? Isn't that kind of like saying, I should have known how to do that math problem when I was in the 5th grade, but you never were taught how to do that math problem? Like, you didn't have that information. So how could you have known? How should you have known? Right? Another one that comes up that's related to this. And I say that because oftentimes it's not just one belief that's sticking, like I should have known better. There's multiple ways that we say this to ourselves. There's multiple things that come up besides just one thing. That's how I help people. Like we figure out all the different ways that you're saying it. There could be 10, 20, 30, 40 different ways that you say the same thing that's all got a tight grip, and we've got to rewire all of it. So one of the other ones is that I failed myself. And a lot of people feel that way. They feel like, oh, I should have known better. I'm such a failure. I failed myself because I didn't know better. But here's how I want you to reframe this. Isn't it possible that you protected yourself the best you could with what you had at the time? Instead of saying you failed yourself, can you give yourself a reframe that's compassionate like that? Like, well, maybe I was just protecting myself, doing the best I could with what I had, the knowledge, the information, the experiences at that time. Isn't that possible? And I just want you to think about that. So if you have a pen and paper, one thing that you can do is write down 3 things that you've only been able to recognize after getting away from your abuser. Just write them down and just honor that as wisdom that you gained. Okay? 3 things. Like, what if you always suspected that they were cheating? And after you got out, you finally got confirmation. How would you have known? You didn't know. There was no way for you to know, right? Oh, I should have known. They were really good at hiding it, right? So write down 3 things and then really just sit with it and be like, wow, I couldn't have known those things. I was doing the best I could with what I had in that moment. You've got to give yourself compassion. There's no healing when you're trying to beat yourself up. Beating yourself up does not mean you're going to not repeat the same mistakes ever again. The reason that you don't repeat the same mistakes is because you learn from them. Okay? Simple as that. A lot of times, and this is key, and you need to hear this, wisdom comes after our experiences, not during them. Okay? You may have even had experiences like this. You know, when you had a child for the first time and you were learning how to feed your child, bathe your child, manage the schedules, help them nap, like all the things, right? Well, now let's say your child's older. You, as that wise parent, can advise someone else now. When you were doing it, you didn't know what the heck you were doing. You didn't have that wisdom in the moment. You learn it after. So this doesn't mean that you're a failure if you don't have the information while you're in the situation. It means you're growing. Now you have it. Now you're wise. Now you can pass this information along to other people. Now you can scream it from the rooftops if you want. Okay? This is so important to remember. Wisdom comes after, not during. And as long as you learn the lesson, you're in good shape. Okay? One last final thing I want to remind you of is that you couldn't have known better because you didn't have the safety or the clarity that you have now. When your body and your mind is dysregulated, and when you're in abuse, it is pretty much always, you're not even really seeing through a clear lens. So how could you have known better, right? You're literally just trying to protect yourself. You're just trying to not get quote unquote in trouble. You're just trying to not get hurt. You're just trying to avoid being criticized and being talked down to and being screamed at, right? How could you have known better? Your whole outlook was to protect yourself at that time. We wouldn't expect somebody who was under duress like that in the real world. Oh, you should have known better. Oh, you should have, had that information at that time. Why are we expecting that of ourselves? Right? Let's give ourselves a little bit of grace here. If you want to take that first step for yourself, grab that Letting Go booklet on my website. It's $7.77, and all the proceeds go to a local domestic violence shelter in my community called the Ion Center. And I'm not getting anything from this. I'm sending all of the money straight to them. So it's a really good first step to start releasing these things for yourself. If this is the first time you're tuning in or the 100th time you're tuning into this podcast, even that is just a really great way to give back. And if you don't want the booklet for yourself, you can pass it on to somebody else. And it's a beautiful donation to help other survivors. All right, so next week we're going to tackle another one, and that is why you shouldn't have left sooner. Eek! Okay, so stay tuned for that. It will be here, and I, again, appreciate and value you so much as my listeners, and I'll talk to you next week.